Thank you. Okay. Welcome everybody. And sorry I'm late. It's later than late, but very quickly let's get right into the parsha. It is a jam-packed parsha, a lot going on. To tell you, summarize it in a nutshell would be difficult, but let's just say that Aaron is given the responsibilities of lighting the menorah at the beginning of the parsha. The details of how the menorah is built is repeated. It's an interesting question why. Rav Hirsch goes into it, but suffice it to say, its purpose and then therefore Aaron's purpose is sort of being emphasized. Once everything's now finally established, since the middle of Shemot, we've been getting laws of how to build a Mishkan, how the Jewish people are going to travel. Finally, the Jewish people began to travel. And it doesn't take long for them to mess up and start complaining about things, no meat, no this, no that. I skipped the part of the parsha that deals with the chatzotzerot, the trumpets that Moshe made, also in this week's parsha, and so it's a very rough beginning for the Jewish people who have very, very high goals, very high standards that they're expected to live by, and they're not there yet. That's really the point of this story so far. They're not there yet. Rav Hirsch again points out that this is a great proof for how the Torah is divine. Any other holy book usually has its holy people are great people. Our holy people are a work in progress, like the rest of us, and so that's one of the proofs of the fact that this is not the Torah is not just a book written about perfect people. It's a book written for people to perfect themselves after seeing all of the different other possibilities. So with no further ado, we're going to go right into the parsha in some more detail. All right, good. And we're going to go to the right after right towards the beginning of the parsha. The Levium are made separate. They're made to oh, I can't believe I forgot to mention. Very important. This class is sponsored very generously by Don Liebman in memory of his father, Yitzchak ben Shmuel. The neshama should have an aliyah. And it's going to be a strange little coincidence, if you believe in coincidence. I prepared this class, obviously earlier in the week, and I only found out today that the class was sponsored by his son in memory of his father. It's very strange that twice today we're going to have the commentaries of a father followed by a commentary of that father's son. It's going to be like a father-son tag team twice today with the Chidushay Arim and the Sfat Emet, and then the Chatam Sofer and the Ktav Sofer. So very strange. I did not plan it out that way, but that's how we're going to see things after all. So let's get right into it. The one of my favorite ideas. I mean, there's dozens of them in Rashi's commentary on the Chumash that are like I can call my favorite ideas. This is one of them. This is in the top 10 probably. Very important concept about human beings and what the Torah and therefore Hashem thinks of people. The Moshe is supposed to take the Levium and give them the jobs that really the firstborns were supposed to do. And because they failed during the time of the golden calf, and the Levium did not fail. Therefore, the Levium took the place of those firstborns. This is where they're finally inaugurated into their office. They're finally given, their badge. Okay, they're shaved, etc., etc. We talked about that in the Ascent to Harmony class. But right off the bat, we're going to say Kach et Haleviim mitoch bnei Yisrael v'tiharta otam. So Moshe is told to take the Leviim from the Bnei Israel, and he's supposed to purify them. Seems pretty simple. Take them, purify them, right? Rashi says that's not enough. Kach, which usually means take, like grab something and do something with it. Rashi says, Kach et Levim really here means kachem b'dvarim. You're supposed to convince them with words. What does that mean? Ashreichem, tell them how lucky they are. Shetizku lichyot, shemashim lamakom, that they're doing the work of Hashem. You're so lucky. You convince them. Use your rhetoric. So what's Rashi really saying here? What's the point? And so the Gur Arya, again, the Maharal Miprag, beautiful words here. He says, "Ein shayach lomar al ha'adam ticha." You can't say about a person, take, grab the person. Mipnei she'adam birshut atzmo. A person has a mind. A person has their own reshut. You can't just take a person. You can't. It's a little shayach. It's not. It doesn't fit. So therefore, you have to be b'divrehem, b'dvarim. You have to. It's the only way you can grab a person is by convincing them. They have a mind. You talk to people. You try to convince them. You don't force things down people's throats. You have to be able to have conversations. There needs to be dialogue. If there's no dialogue, if dialogue breaks down, there's a breakdown in humanity itself. And we've noticed that probably if you've been even somewhat conscious of what's going on in the news, you've probably noticed that the dialogue discussion is pretty much dead. As soon as you try to say something that's at all controversial, you're shut down, you're canceled, you're whatever else. You're just not listened to. You could say the most logical, obvious fact, and if it's not a popular fact nowadays, if somebody feels insulted by it or offended, as the word is, if somebody's so woke that they can't wake up, then there's this problem, and that the only way, the only thing that's left is to convince them by words. And if you can't have words, like I said, there's really nothing else. You can't take people. That's the point. Did you have a question? I thought I heard a question. Okay.
No, I just thought it was funny, the whole woke and then waken thing. Sorry, I was saying ha ha ha.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to skip just a few psukim later, about 13 psukim down. Still talking about the Leviim. And here we're going to have the comment of Rashi and then the Chidusha Arim, followed by the Sfat Emet. So the pasuk says, this is 8:19 in Bamidbar, Vetna et haLeviim netunim la'Aaron u'lvanav mitoch bnei Yisrael. And then you're going to make the Leviim given over to Aaron and his sons from bnei Yisrael, from the rest of the Jews. You're like separating the Leviim, giving them to Aaron, and now they're going to be able to do their job. They're going to do the job, the work that the Bnei Israel need them to do in the tent of meeting. And this way they're going to basically give some sort of forgiveness for the Jewish people. El HaKodesh. And that way there's not going to be negef, which is usually translated as a plague. No plague is going to come to the Jewish people from becoming too close to the sanctuary. See, the Leviim have this important job of keeping the Bnei Israel safe and healthy, not with any kind of medicine or vaccine or anything. In this case, what the Leviim do is they do the job of the Mikdash, and because they're doing it and Bnei Israel don't have to do it, that keeps the Bnei Israel safe. Because there's a chance that they'll not be pure enough, etc., etc. The job is for the Leviim to do. Very nice. What can Rashi possibly have to say about that? So, if you look at this pasuk very carefully, that this whole verse, Rashi points out, Chamisha pa'amim nemru b'nei Yisrael b'mikra zeh. It says b'nei Yisrael 5 times in this pasuk. So if you want, we can point these out, right? It's not so difficult. In the first line here, it says mitoch b'nei Yisrael, 1. Avodat b'nei Yisrael, 2. Bo'o omed l'chaper al b'nei Yisrael, 3. V'lo yel b'nei Yisrael, 4. Negef b'geshet b'nei Yisrael, that's 5. 5 times it says b'nei Yisrael in this pasuk. Rashi is right. We've just proven Rashi right. We can go on. No. So why does that happen? Why does it say it 5 times? As the email that I sent asks, why does this verse say it 5 times? B'nei Yisrael, l'hodia chibatam. As you probably would have guessed, Rashi says this is to show how much Hashem loves the Jewish people. Chiba, love. So I believe it's connected to the famous popular Arabic word habibi.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Chaviv, habibi. Okay. Anyway, whatever the case may be, that's the verse right there. So Rashi says that this is to show how much the Jewish people are loved by Hashem. V'nichpal askarotehen mikra echad minyan chamisha chumshei Torah v'chach re'iti what's it called? Bereshit Rabbah. So this is sorry, it should be B'midbar Rabbah. Huh? Interesting. I think it's B'midbar Rabbah. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe it is B'midbar. Anyway, so Rashi says he sees this in the Midrash. The Midrash says this, that this is a hint to the 5. Why 5 times? 5 are the books of the Torah. Right? So that is why it says it 5 times, to show how much Hashem loves the Jewish people. Why, however, you must ask yourself, why is Hashem's love specifically here? It could be anywhere in the Torah. You could just have any pasuk in the Torah which says Bnei Yisrael 5 times, and that would show Hashem loves the Jewish people. Why do we need a reminder that Hashem loves the Jewish people of all places here when the Levim are chosen to represent them? Says the Chidushe Arim, the first Rebbe of the Ger Hasidim, Ite Barashi Haskati Bnei Yisrael Hey Pamim B'Pasuk Shechavivin B'Chamisha Chumshei Torah. Hashem shows that Hashem loves the Jewish people by comparing them to the 5 books of Moses. Why specifically in this parsha, this pasuk, this area, this paragraph, for lack of a better word? Rak lefi shenivcharu halavim lo yichalish datam shel bnei Yisrael b'avur zeh ki chavivin heim. Because what's happening? The Levim are now being chosen to represent the Jewish people instead of the firstborns of the Jewish people. Imagine how you would feel at that moment, standing there with the Bnei Yisrael being separated out, and instead of, you know what, we had a job for your firstborn, but you messed up a year ago, so now we're going to choose the Levim instead of you. Your family is going to be represented by this guy who doesn't even know you. How do you feel about that? Is that okay with you? Shouldn't be okay with you, because what you'd feel terrible. This is your honor. This is your respect. Does Hashem even love me anymore? He's choosing other people to do my job. How does Hashem feel about me? Says the pasuk, Hashem loves you. He's mentioning your name 5 times, like his beloved Torah. 5 times. Because he loves you so much. You're still as much beloved to Hashem as you were before. Hashem doesn't hate the sinner. Hashem, quite the contrary, Hashem waits for the sinner to come back and to behave, to be better than they were before. We don't want anybody to be jealous. We don't want anybody to be upset. Hashem doesn't want that. Hashem wants for everybody to realize how beloved all the Jewish people are, even still. Okay. Now the Sfat Emet, like as I said before, the son of the Chidush Arim, the second Rebbe of Ger. So he quotes from his father, Avimori, right? Zelashono, he says, quotes the Rashi. He says because this is so that people don't get upset and realize how much Hashem still loves them. V'ha'emed dichtiv b'toch b'nei Yisrael b'chirat levim u'mikoach klalot b'nei Yisrael. Furthermore, you have to understand, he says, that there is an idea of a Klal Yisrael, a group of people called a Klal. And we have a problem when we choose the Levim out of the Klal. And the problem is there's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot that tells us that you're never supposed to separate yourself, Mina Tzibur, from the congregation. You're always supposed to be within the congregation. Here's the Levim. They're being picked up or convinced out of this group of Bnei Israel. They're being made to do their own thing. How's that okay? How is that not being separated from the tzibur? It's not because this is not that Hashem is separating them from the tzibur. Rak adirabba. This is actually the exact opposite. If he mashe adam batal al hatzibur, HaKadosh Baruch Hu bocher bo. When a person does things for the tzibur, Hashem chooses that person. When the Leviim are serving Hashem as representatives of the Bnei Israel, that's Hashem choosing us. Hashem is choosing the Bnei Israel. This is Hashem asking us to have representatives, and those representatives aren't separate from us. They are us. They are our elected officials, except better than elected. They're Hashem chosen officials. The only government better than the democracy is one where Hashem is clearly in charge. Hashem is always in charge, but when He's more clearly in charge, that's when that's the better government. I'm not saying theocracy, by the way. Just don't get me wrong. Don't misquote me here. Anyway.
We won't.
Thank you. Lefisha halavim hein hayoter mitbatlim l'klal Yisrael. They're better than just separating themselves from Bnei Israel. They're actually doing their job. There's being samech on them. The Bnei Israel are relying on them. They literally lean their hands on them, and that's how you know that the Leviim are not something other. They are a part of the Bnei Israel by doing this job. So that's why the Bnei Israel had no reason to be upset, according to the Chidush Arim. And furthermore, why Hashem is showing the Bnei Israel here, why they're so beloved. And furthermore, according to his son, the Sfat Emet, the Leviim, as separated as they might have been, they weren't actually separate from the Bnei Israel. They were serving, they were doing the job of the Bnei Israel, so they were quite a part of them. They were their constituents. The Bnei Israel were their constituents. Okay. Next piece is a few psukim quoted together. This is about the Pesach sacrifice in the desert. The Bnei Israel, in this week's Parsha, one of the things I missed from my summary, like I said, it's impossible to summarize the Parsha accurately. One of the things I missed was that this was the only Pesach celebrated in the desert. Only or first, we're not going to get into that right now, but definitely this is the only one mentioned as being celebrated. And this is also Pesach Sheni is mentioned in this Parsha. That's where we get the command for a Pesach Sheni for people who are tamei or too far away from Yerushalayim to bring the Pesach sacrifice. They're allowed to do it 1 month later. So chapter 9, verses 2 through 5. The Jewish people, they did the Pesach sacrifice in its right time. Arba Asar Yom B'Chodesh Hazeh, on the 14th day of that month, Bein Arbaim, in the evening, Tasu Oto B'Moado B'Chol Chukotav B'Chol Mishpatav Tasu Oto. They did it in the right time, with all its rules, and with all its laws. V'daber Moshe al Bnei Yisrael la'asot Pesach. Hashem had told the Jewish people to do the Pesach sacrifice. With the Pesach Rishon Barba Yom Lachodesh Bein Arbaim Midbar Sinai V'Kachol Asher Tziva Hashem Et Moshe Kinasu Bnei Yisrael. So in the desert, they did this first Pesach. It was on the 14th of the month. In the evening, towards the evening, Bein Arbaim, twilight, as we've been talking about in the Ein Yaakov class. See, all of our classes are kind of beautifully fitting in together. So they did it in the Sinai desert, as Hashem commanded Moshe. That's what the Bnei Israel did. Meshech Chochmah asks the question: why is the pasuk literally, these psukim literally twice reminding us that it happened? Or is it twice? Was it once? Either way, it's telling us at least once. Twice. Bein Harabayim, that it was done in the twilight. It was done towards the evening. Why do we need to know that? Is that an important part of the halacha that you have to, why are you telling me this twice? So this is a long piece. I'm going to quickly try to summarize. We're not going to get into the rules of what Ben Hashmasha is, Ben Arbaim. But let's just call it twilight. Let's call it close to evening. What the Meshech Chochmah wants to point out, and we'll read some of this in Hebrew real quick. So how many people were there? We're talking about 600,000 something Jews. Keep in mind, there are also Laman de Amar Nashim Berishon Chova. So there's an opinion in the Gemara that women were also obligated to Pesach sacrifice separately from men, especially on this first Pesach. Im Kain, how you follow? That's amazing. How many Kohanim were there? Three Kohanim for 600,000 men and probably an equal amount of women. So let's say 1.2 million korbanot to bring. There were 3 Kohanim to do all the work. Since Nadav and Avihu died, Pinchas wasn't a Kohen yet, and Moshe couldn't do it. We had literally 3 Kohanim to do all of this work, all of this avoda. And it wasn't just, just sacrifice it and put it on the altar. There's quite a bit of work to do. He says, Avodat, Rivavot, Pesachim, Vizman Katzar. There are a lot of Pesach sacrifices to do in a short amount of time. So how did they do it? You know how they did it? There's only one answer that makes sense. And it's the answer that most people don't like. It must have been a miracle. It had to be a miracle. And how do you know it had to be a miracle? Because the amazing part of it is they did it. They all did it as it was supposed to be done. And they did it by Bein Harabayim. They did it by twilight. They did it in the right time. By twilight, right before the Pesach, right before Pesach holiday, right before the 15th of Nisan, all the Jewish people were all done with their sacrifices, and the Kohanim could be completely finished. Bein Harabayim happened. It was time for Pesach. They couldn't bring the Korban Pesach anymore, and that was that. They did it. It's a Pele Gadol, he says. It's an amazing thing. Hashem commanded it, and that it be done, and it was done exactly as it says. The verse says, the Psukim say, Kimishpatam, all of the laws were followed. Nothing was omitted. There were no shortcuts taken. There are no leniencies. Everything was done exactly as it should be done. This is not the only time in the Torah when such a miracle is being mentioned. Keep in mind. It's it's really quite amazing. We have to realize that when all of the Korban Pesachs, when all of them were finished at Bein HaArbaim, the emphasis being that we prepared them all by Bein HaArbaim, we have to realize what an amazing achievement this was for the Kohanim. It's a huge miracle, something that it's practically impossible. And if the Torah records it like this, then it's a clear indication that this could only have been accomplished through miracle. Nobody gave up. Nobody said, "Look at this line. There's like 1.2 million people in front of me to give." Imagine the last person in line, right?
It sounds a little crazy, you know, like in Pirkei Avos it says like all the miracles that happened in the base of Mikdash, and you know, like so many people went for like Shlosh Regalim, but there was enough space.
Right.
Like I'm just wondering why this was never said, because it's pretty impressive.
It's being said now.
No, I know, but like in Pirkei Avos, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously there are so many things that are left out, but
Pirkei Avos is talking about the miracles that were happening in Yerushalayim during the time of the first Beit HaMikdash. The second Beit HaMikdash, by the way, didn't have, right, the column that always stood, no rotten meat, no woman ever got sick. No pregnant woman ever got sick from the smell of meat. You know, there's dead meat like literally everywhere. Right? It's a nauseating smell.
wait, that didn't happen? That did happen in, like, people did, the column didn't have a straight thing in the second basement? Sure it did.
That they did not. Only the first Beit HaMikdash had that miracle.
Oh.
That's what that Mishnah says. That Mishnah Pirkei Avos that you're referencing. But there are other miracles that happen throughout Tanakh that are just not mentioned. How about the fact, we make a big deal of the Ramban points this out. This is probably not for this parsha, but since you brought it up, we make a big deal about how Sarah was 100 years old, 90 years old when she had Yitzchak. That's a miracle, right? 90-year-old women don't usually have children, right? Okay. How old was Yocheved when she had Moshe?
Yeah, also pretty old.
So the Jewish people were in Mitzrayim for 210 years. Okay, Moshe was 80 years old then. So 210 minus 80 is how old Tzipporah was, because not Tzipporah, Yocheved was when she had Moshe, right? Because she was born. She was born between the gates. Rashi says she was born right when they entered Mitzrayim. And that's the 210 years that they were slaves. Never mind the time that they were there before slavery, which is a few years before Yosef dies. Right. So there's a lot of miracles the Torah doesn't mention. Like I said, the Ramban points this out. Usually the answer is why there's no mention of it is because or less mention of it is because we take it as a given that there are a lot of miracles that were performed for our forefathers, and the Jewish people have to understand that Hashem performs miracles for us. That's how we survive. We are a miraculous people. That's the short answer. There's probably more to say, but again, that's in another parsha. All right, we're gonna skip on down to where the Jewish people start moving. This is after, like I said, after the trumpets, after all the assignments are given, after the Levim are established, and we're gonna have a quick, beautiful vort, very beautiful essay written by Rabbi Norman Lamb, who many of you may or may not have heard of, but he was a few days ago was his first yard site. He passed away last year, just a few weeks after his wife passed away of COVID. He passed away as well. He was, I think, 92 years old when he passed. He was I think he was a second or third president of Yeshiva University, and he was third president of Yeshiva University. He was also the chancellor of Yeshiva University. He's a very, I never really, I'm not a graduate of YU myself, I haven't really known too much about Rabbi Norman Lamb, except for I read his book on the laws of mourning, which is a very good book. I never really paid much attention to his drashot, but apparently he's got several books he's written on basically essays on the parsha and different themes. So he has an essay on this next pasuk, or next few psukim actually. So there's a very strange thing that happens in this week's parsha. It's the upside down nuns, and you have it here in the source sheet. Right before chapter 10, verse 35, and right after verse 36, those two psukim, these are the psukim we say when we open the ark and when we close the ark, right, on a regular Shabbat or when we read the Torah. When the ark was set out, Moshe would say, "Go forward, Hashem, may your enemies be scattered, may your foes run away from you." That's very, very beautiful words to sing so happily as we do when we open the ark. And then when we close the Aron, right before Musaf, what do we say? "V'nucha yomar shu Hashem rivavot alfei Yisrael." Those two psukim are actually back to back. It says, and when it stopped, he said, "Return, O Hashem, you who are Hashem's, you who are Israel's myriads of thousands, alfei Yisrael, rivavot alfei Yisrael." All right, so it's bracketed off by these nuns, and the different commentaries explain why that is. I'll just bring you what the Gemara says. The Gemara says in Shabbat 116a, towards the top there, it says that there's differences of opinion. There is an opinion, I think it's in the name of Rabbi Akiva, that there's 7 books. Rabbi Huda Nasi, sorry. Rabbi Huda Nasi himself has the opinion that the Torah is not the 5 books of Moses, as we always call it. It's 7 books of Moses. Why 7 books of Moses? Because Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, first part of Bamidbar. Then these 2 psukim are a sefer all its own, 5th book of the Torah. The 6th book of the Torah is the rest of Bamidbar, and the 7th book of the Torah is Devarim. Right? So this book is a separate book in the Torah. And the reason that it's here, and it's basically bracketed off by these nuns, and the reason that it's here is because the Jewish people are complaining, and if you see them mess up 3 times in a row, it becomes basically a chazaka. It becomes like a rule, like they're obviously bad, and therefore that would define the Jewish people as evil. And to avoid that, the Torah places these 2 psukim in between some of the complaining, so that we're not under the impression that the Jewish people are all bad, are through and through bad. That's the famous Gemara's answer about why the nuns are there. But Rabbi Dr. Norman Lamb, in a commentary for the ages written in the 1960s, has an essay called Upstream, and his question is, okay, I understand the need for brackets, but why a nun? Could have been a chaf. Don't even have to do it, doesn't have to be even, you could also put it upside down if you want to, put a chet on its side. Why does it have to be, why a nun? What does nun mean? So he starts off by talking about he was one of the great proponents of this idea of Torah Umada, of respecting culture and university education and science, etc. Other philosophies outside of Jewish philosophies still have truth in them. He says, and again, he points. Let's start off. He says that the refusal to confront contemporary life is not a viable philosophy for Orthodox Judaism in our times. I believe this is a theme that needs constant reiteration, continuous consideration, and deep reflection. So the importance of absorbing other cultures. Right? He's modern Orthodox. That's the definition of modern Orthodoxy. Today, however, I wish to emphasize the other side of the coin, The caution that we must exercise never to lose ourselves in the world, not to be overly impressed with the great culture in which we live. This point is made with consummate skill in a comment by the Kabbalistic Midrash and Ne'elam on a famous passage in today's Sedra, which we will all recognize from our prayer book by Ibn Sa'aron, etc., etc. So let's get to the underlying part. These two nuns are part of our Masoretic tradition. What do these strange symbols, which appear nowhere else in the Torah, mean? The author of Midrash and Ne'elam spares no words in describing their enormous significance. They are, we are told, the very glory of God and the foundation of the world. Whoa! These nuns, these upside-down nuns, are the glory of God and the foundation of the world. It is because of this that Yaakov blessed his children with them. For one of Yaakov's chief blessings for his children was V'yidgu larov. Let them be plentiful. What? The word yidgu is derived from the Hebrew word dag, for fish. Another word in Hebrew and Aramaic for fish is nun. Thus, the Targum reads, for the blessing we just mentioned, let them be plentiful as the fish of the sea. Furthermore, this Midrash Ne'elam continues, the Almighty excluded idol worship from the fraternity of these two nuns, etc., etc. We're going to skip to the underlined part. For what they mean is that the letter nun means fish, and therefore the inverted letters, the nunim hafuchim, symbolize fish that are willing to swim upstream against the tide, against the currents and tendencies of their surroundings. It is this remarkable quality which characterizes the true Jew and distinguishes him or her from the pagan. The authentic Jew must be able to dissent, to keep apart, to be unpopular if necessary, to oppose the time, to swim upstream. An individual who cannot swim upstream cannot affirm his own independent judgment against the mob. The person neither respects nor loves himself, and one who does not love himself cannot love others, as our Torah commands us, love thy neighbor as thyself, not hate thy neighbor as thyself. The upstream tradition of Judaism means that we must dare to be different. It means that when religious observance is frowned upon, we must frown right back and follow the dictates of our conscience and the teachings of the halakha. It means that when religion is popular, but for the wrong reasons, such as social and aesthetic reasons, we must not hesitate to say so openly and urge people to practice their religion for the proper motives. By the way, what he's talking about here is there are people who are religious for the wrong reasons. They're religious for reasons of faith rather than reasons of knowledge, of thinking. They have nothing else to turn to. They're desperate, so they become religious. That's not how we want people to be religious. We want people to be religious by asking questions, by probing, by thinking. Like Rav Hirsch said a few weeks ago, when we were talking about the difference between other religions and Judaism, and how Judaism, especially with the menorah, represents light, enlightening things, seeing things for what they are, and how other religions very often emphasize death, the unknown, the darkness. So we're not like that. When others, for instance, consider it good style to indulge in uninhibited, unrestrained lavishness, whether in the pagan extravagance of the funeral or the vulgar exhibition of the gala bar mitzvah, we must not fear to affirm our upstream mentality, to assert the delicacy of Judaism's democratic traditions, its insistence upon simplicity, and the emphasis upon the spiritual and the religious. Whenever we find society in violation of the sacred ideals of Judaism, we must become the nunim hafuchim, those who are willing to go upstream and not downstream. We must do so even if we are exoriated, even if the pagans bear us enmity because of it. In other words, even if it's unpopular, even if, as we talked about before, even if the woke crowd doesn't like it, we have our truths. We're not going to bend just because they're unpopular. We're not going to change things. We're not going to change halacha for what current science or anything might say. If halacha is halacha and will not change, the upstream tradition of Judaism is also means to dare to be alone, right? he quotes Professor Whitehead, Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik, they speak so broodingly of loneliness as a major component of religious thought and experience. To be different, to go against the tide, often leaves people with a feeling of aloneness, but that is what makes mankind worthy and life worthwhile. It's okay to be lonely sometimes. You are alone. To contradict what everybody's been saying about this pandemic, we're all in it together. We're not in it together at all. And that's okay. It's okay if some of us during the pandemic refrained from Netflix and spent more time learning or growing or doing or exercising or whatever else we were doing. It's okay to do that. We need some of that alone time. To be different and unpopular and risk loneliness is often extremely difficult and painful, hence the quite normal desire for assimilation by the minority to the majority, the desire to emulate the non-Jew and adopt whatever is not particularly Jewish. This tendency is reflected in an anecdote, so he gives a little quote story. But just real quick, I just want to, since we're talking about loneliness and stuff, we're not talking about, obviously, we're not talking about like clinical depression. Right? If you're feeling lonely on a regular basis, feeling down from this loneliness, that's not good. And if you're feeling worthless, et cetera, you definitely want to speak to a professional. That's not what he's talking about here. He's talking about the kind of loneliness we feel when we're the only person in the room who's not eating because it's a fast day, or because it's a non-kosher establishment, or not kosher enough establishment. That's okay to stand alone sometimes if you're standing for something. Had Hashem given the mitzvot, the Gentiles would have been impelled by my desire to emulate everything non-Jews. Yeah, it's a beautiful essay. You have the whole piece to look at on your own. Talks about Bach and Mozart and some other things. Yeah, and he explains the Mishnah Pirkei Avot there. Very nice, especially for this time of the year. All right. Anyway, so that's Rabbi Dr. Norma Lamb. I believe his yard site was the 8th, if I'm not mistaken, the 8th of Sivan, and right now we're in the 15th, so about a week ago. Didn't get a chance to say something about it earlier. It happened to be last year. Anyway, yeah. So that's the his comment there on the upside down nuns. Right, we go further. Here's what the children of Israel continue to complain. Chapter 11, verse 10. Do we have time for this? I hope so. Okay, so here's the second father and son theme as promised, Chatam Sofer and Katav Sofer, as promised. All right, so the verse says, Vayishma Moshe et ha'am bochel lishpechotav ish lepetach ahalo yichar af Hashem me'od be'inei Moshe ra. So Moshe heard that the people were crying about their families, each person in the opening of their tent, and Hashem became very angry, and in Moshe's eyes, this was very bad. Asks the Chatam Sofer. This is a very strange extra word here, lemishpachotav. Each man was crying over his family. What's going on here? So the Chatam Sofer says, "V'ishma Moshe et ha'am bochel mishpachotav ish lepetach ochelo." So why is it? He asks, why specifically over their family? Yesh lomar sharei kaimelan ein yetzahara sholet el b'ma she'inav rot. Up until this point, you could have said that the yetzahara only really bothered somebody over something that their eyes actually see. And here, the pitche alehem, the openings of their tents, as we said regarding with Bilam's chant. He said Matovu or Halacha Yaakov. He was trying to curse the Jewish people, and he saw how amazing, in fact, it was that the Jewish people had such tzniut, that they had such modesty, that that their openings did not open up to each other. They were not able to glance into each other's tents. So this great tzniut of each family was something that was praised. So we need to now understand then why it is that the Rishonim say, and he quotes here the Akedah, that the Bala Akedah said that the Jewish people had a tava at this point. When it says that they were crying for their families, the Rishonim say that the reason that they were crying was because they wanted to sleep around with other families, with other people's wives and such. Which is very strange because they don't see those wives, and the Yetzer Hara should only be bothering them about things they see. So why are they all of a sudden now? Why are they being bothered by the Yetzer Hara for that? So he says that that until this point, whenever the Jewish people had complained before, all the time that they were in the desert, and all the time they will be complaining later on, you could have said maybe what they were really thinking was, me myself, I don't mind not having food and water. But I'm really sad for my neighbor who's suffering so much. My neighbor, poor neighbor. Why does he have to suffer? Me, I don't mind. So everybody could have been complaining really for their fellow Jew. However, here where it says specifically that they were actually crying for their families, this time they weren't even pretending. There was no facade. They were making it very clear that they had nothing to do with their neighbors' suffering. They were complaining about the suffering that they were feeling from not being able to express their lust, or not being able to jump into the other family and mess with their shalom bayit. So Eina al iske mishpachot be'etzem ele ish lepetach achalo kol echad bocha al petach achalo she'eina mekavanat neged petach chavero kedei sheyitava. Nobody was crying about his neighbor. So all the other times they could have been crying, "Oh, I'm so sad for my neighbor." They're not. That's clearly not the case now. This is what was so evil in Moshe's eyes. It was very clear that the Jewish people were complaining about their families, but only for themselves, and the fact that they did not care really about their neighbor and the neighbor's livelihood. Okay. Right. So the next piece, before we get to the commentary of the Chatam Sofer's son, the Ktav Sofer, is also the Rebbe of Yosef Chaim Sonnenfeld and many others. It says in Bamidbar, later on in the parsha, Moshe is overwhelmed by all of the complaints. He asks Hashem for help. Hashem tells him that there's going to be 70 elders who are going to be given also the ability, the power, the nevuah of some of the nevuah that Moshe had, and they will also be able to help. And two of the people who didn't show up for the meeting where they were going to get this nevuah were these guys, Eldad and Medad, and they accidentally prophesied, because they're not in control of their prophecy like Moshe was. And they prophesied that the Gemara says that they prophesied that Moshe Rabbeinu would die. And this made people upset, especially part of the prophecy is that Yehoshua would lead them into the land. And this made especially Yehoshua upset. Aviyan Yehoshua ben Nun, Misharet Moshe Mibchurav Ve'omer Adoni Moshe Kilaem. It says Yehoshua, son of Nun, who was Moshe's student, attendant from his young age. He said, "My master Moshe, destroy them." Okay, that's what it means. Destroy them. So literally, like kill them, without a court, without any without any kind of justice system at all. Just like they're bad. Kill them. For what? What was their crime? They said Moshe would die. That's not a crime. It's rude. It's mean. If it is a crime, you get lashes. You don't die, especially without witnesses, without warning, without the whole works. None of that. What's going on? As Rashi, Hatel alehem tzarchei tzibur, vehem kalim me'alehem. So he says we're translating kilaim incorrectly. Destroy them doesn't mean kill them. It means put on them the responsibilities of the tzibur. Give them some jobs. Make them volunteers. Next up, volunteers. Right? Give them the responsibilities of the tzibur. Make them the rabbi of a congregation, and that's what's going to happen. It means give them jobs, public jobs, and that's how they're going to come to an end. In other words, they're going to die young from all the anxiety, the pulling their hair, and all the other troubles that lack of sleep and whatever else they're going to encounter in their new positions. That's going to kill them. It's a tough job being a rabbi, apparently.
That's not that you're talking from experience, right?
I wouldn't know. Nah. It's been a dream. All right. So that's what it says. This is Rashi quoting the Sifrei. It says the Ktav Sofer. It's kind of not too long of a piece. We've got 5 minutes. We can do this. Pirish Rashi hatel alehem tzarchei tzibur v'hem kilaim u'mefarshim medaktikim. The commentaries have to explain what does this mean, Rashi. I want to emphasize. I don't emphasize this enough. As often as I might say this, I don't say this enough. Rashi is supposed to be what's called a pashut shot, simple explanation. A simple explanation is never simple, never. There's a lot of depth in Rashi. There's a reason why Kabbalists like the Maharal have to write a commentary on Rashi. There's a reason why there's all these books, these what are called super commentaries on Rashi. Rashi wrote a commentary, and there's books and books and books explaining Rashi. Beautiful book I read from Rabbi Eisman. I think it's called For Rashi's Diligent Students, for Rashi's Thinking Students, something like that. And it's basically quoting the first few lines of an introduction to a commentary on Rashi. It says if you really want to understand Rashi, you need to study him diligently. You really need to be really read him in depth. There's a series of books called What's Bothering Rashi. I don't know if you know this. There's a sequel to that series of books. There's What's Bothering Rashi 2. and they're jam-packed, beautiful works, those books. Anyway, so here the Ktav Sofer wants to know what's going on here. How is giving them these responsibilities? So what we assumed that giving them these responsibilities is going to destroy them. Right? The job itself is going to kill them. So if Yehoshua was jealous for Moshe, he was just upset that Moshe's honor was being what Yehoshua is saying this, right? Yehoshua is telling Moshe, give them jobs, it'll kill them. Right? If Yehoshua is jealous for Moshe's sake, why would he tell them to give them Moshe's job? Is he saying that Moshe is going to die? Is he saying that they're saying that Moshe is going to die from his responsibilities to give them jobs too? That doesn't make sense. What defense would it be for Moshe if Eldad and Medad would be given these heavy responsibilities? That's not going to be a proof of that's going to kill him or not. Wouldn't the people realize that they died because of these heavy responsibilities? How is that? What does that have to do with Moshe? So without question, no doubt here, that it's not just kina for Moshe. It's not just jealousy for Moshe. Yeshua's goal was not that Eldad and Medad should die. His goal was chinuch. It was chachma. How? He knew that shemit navim b'machane mikol makom lo higiu lekrosli lekrosli Moshe. They were not on the same level as Moshe. They didn't know, the rest of the people, the regular people, the regular folk, didn't know that there was a difference between the prophecy of Eldad and Medad and Moshe's prophecy. Right? And according to the natural order, mutrad im hatzibur yitvatel me'avodat Hashem v'yelech acharonit. What usually happens when people take on the responsibility of the tzibur is that their own avodat hakodesh, their own frumkeit, their own learning, their own davening becomes affected. I can't daven as long as I could before. Now I have to wait for, now the tzibur is depending on me. The congregation's depending on me. Other people need my help. I need to answer phone calls. I need to, edit videos, answer email, whatever I have to do. When the rabbi has to do all these things, that's going to affect their spirituality. Once Eldad and Medad's spirituality is affected, Yehoshua assumed, then the people are gonna see how their nevuah is different from the nevuah of Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu einu doma l'shar neviim. He's not similar to other neviim. She'im lo yu kol kach muvadedim ela tiyeh tardat ha'am alehem. So the fact that is that Moshe's prophecy was only expanded by his responsibilities to the nation. His nevuah wasn't stifled. His spirituality wasn't stifled. Adarabah, it was expanded. Moshe became greater because of his responsibility for the people. When Eldad and Medad would experience a decline, not like Moshe, Kilaim, give them jobs, give them tarchit tzibur, because they won't have the kelim, they won't have the ability to grow from their avoda to the klal, and they're going to melt. Their spirituality is going to diffuse them. It's going to take the air out of their balloon. Get rid of them. In other words, Yehoshua was saying, means knock them down a notch. Show everybody that nobody is like Moshe Rabbeinu. Nobody's prophecy, nobody's avoda, nobody's care for the tzibur, nobody can care about the Jewish people the way that Moshe Rabbeinu cares for the Jewish people. And with that, I want to point out that not only is this class sponsored by Don Liebman in memory of his father, Yitzchak ben Shmuel, but I also neglected to point out that Don also is sponsoring this class in honor of our holy women, the holy women of our tzibur, Julie Goodwin and the rest of the sisterhood who arranged for meals for Don and are taking care of him. And their reward is unfathomable and should only keep growing. Admev Esrim Shana, and we should only see Simcha together and not have to have any more meal trains for sad occasions, only for happy occasions. I'm going to stop the live feed to Facebook and stop the recording, see if there's any